Welcome back to another episode of Chat GRC of the Blue-Lusional podcast, where myself, Devin, and Casey interview a new grassroots candidate every week. And sir, please introduce yourself.
We lost part of the audio here, but this is Steve Schwab running for state legislature in Texas House District 44.
Which is just outside of San Antonio in Guadalupe and Gonzales counties. And so just to give you a little bit of background, I am a retired Army officer of 21 years and currently a professor at the University of Texas San Antonio, where I teach in the management department, although my training is in economics focused on healthcare. Would you like to hear my personal story and how I got here?
Please.
Yes, I would love to. That was my first question, so let's go right ahead on in.
Yeah, I kind of figured. So, I grew up actually in Massachusetts, so, I know that's going to, maybe some will try to hold that against me, but, they say that you can't control where you're born, but you can control where you settle. So I wasn't born in Texas, but I got here as fast as I could. But I grew up, typical, suburban middle class up until the time I was about 11. And when I was 11, my mom woke me up to take my dad to the emergency room. And so we went. My dad was in some sort of astonishing pain in his leg. My dad was the kind of guy that never went to the doctor, despised going to the doctor. And so if we're getting up in the middle of the night to go to the emergency room, we knew something was wrong. And they did the take an aspirin and call your doctor in the morning. We went home for about 2 hours, then went to the other hospital. There were 2 hospitals in town where they rushed him into surgery and told us if he had waited, he would have lost his leg. That was the beginning of a long journey. My dad, by the time I was 14, could no longer work. He was suffering from a couple of things, primarily the impact of being exposed to Agent Orange in Vietnam. And so he became sick. We had insurance, but it only covered so much. And when he stopped working, right, you lose some of your access to insurance. And then all of a sudden we were going in debt. They were trying to foreclose on the house. We were able to keep the house through some lawsuits, but it became, a huge struggle. And I would say my mom, who is my hero, was this vibrant social person, very, very engaged in the community. And she not only became his full-time caregiver, but she also worked to keep up the flow to the family, right, to pay for food. And so my mom was working full-time, taking care of my dad, and all the time keeping a smile on her face so that her kids, myself and my older brother, wouldn't know how hard it was for her. And I don't know if she, to this day, she just says, that was that, and I had to do what I had to do. So I got into college, and, to my dad's credit, my dad, both my parents, were huge believers in education. And I got into George Washington University, and I remember looking at my dad. I was really excited I got in, and then I looked at him, and I was like, I know we can't afford this, right? And my dad, who, again, hated talking about money, didn't think he should ever talk about money with his kids, said to me, your job was to get in, my job is to pay for it. And so he took on debt, right? And fortunate, there were government programs, right? There were loans that even if you had bad credit, which he did because we were in so much debt from his health bills, they were able to scrape together the loans to send me to college. First semester in college, I decided I needed to try to help. And so I joined ROTC. And that sort of changed my life because, that started my path to the Army. My senior year in college, 9/11 hit. And so, I was sort of, worried, am I going to be separated from my family a few months? Might go to Europe, who knows? All of a sudden it was, a much more serious escalation. And I ended up spending over 3 years, 39 months to be specific, in Iraq. I had branched as a medical service corps officer, meaning that I was running a field medical unit attached to or part of 1st Cavalry Division. So, the tanks move in and the medical unit goes with them to take care of the wounded. And so ended up pretty deep in combat, taking care of our wounded soldiers. And again, did that for, over 3 years, there for a year, back, there for 15 months, back, there for another year, back. After 3 years, I was pretty burned out and was like, you know what? I did my part. I'm ready to move on to the next phase of my life. But I got contacted. There was a program where the Army could send me to a program they had with Baylor University. And they would get me an MBA. They would get me a Master's of Health Administration. And then I would move into healthcare finance. And I said, well, that sounds pretty good. I think I can do that. So I went and I got this dual degree program. I was pretty intense, but at the end of the day, I was going to school and I was getting paid to go to school, and I was kind of like, this is cool. So I ended up being the chief financial officer of DoD's largest biomedical research institute. And along the way, I was like, I like research, and I think maybe this is what I want to do. And so they were looking for someone to get a PhD to go teach back in this program with Baylor that I had gone through. And so they said, hey, go find a school and we'll pay as long as it's within a certain range of money, we'll pay for it. Unless it's Wharton, because even though Wharton's private, we'll pay for that, even though it's more expensive because it's Wharton. And so I said, okay. And so I applied to Wharton and I got in. And, to my surprise, right, it was one of those things where, and I'll bring this up later, never self-reject, was like, hey, all they can do is say no. And so I got to go to Wharton, and I was very fortunate that I got a degree in applied economics there and focused in healthcare. And then I went and I taught for a few years for the Army, and the Army likes to move people around. So after 3 years of teaching, they said, all right, it's time to move. And I was selected to be the chief financial officer of the military's largest hospital. It's here in San Antonio, Texas, Brooke Army Medical Center. It's also a level 1 trauma center, sees lots of civilian patients. We deal with insurers, all the sort of typical healthcare complexity. Did that for 2 years before I said, okay, it's time to hang it up. And I had missed being an academic. I really enjoyed teaching. I really enjoyed research, trying to find new solutions to old problems. And fortunately, as I was thinking about retirement, somebody from the University of Texas, San Antonio reached out and said, hey, we need someone to teach healthcare management. We think you should apply for this job. And so I did, along with many others, because you never count on it. But I got the job. And so for the last, now in my 3rd year, I've been teaching at UTSA,
Nice.
which I absolutely love. But November 2024 occurs, and I couldn't have been more upset about the outcome of that election. And one thing I try to say is this is not left versus right. I'm not, I think we just need to sort of come back from the extremes. And so, I try to avoid sort of, anger, sort of hateful talk. At the same point, I fought for something that I believe in, right? I believe that the U.S. is the best country because of the mission that we stand for and what we try to make this country, even though we've got plenty of failings, right? We know that there are many times that we have not lived up to our mission statement. And yet we still try, and which is why I love America, but it's also why I was so upset when really what I'll call it, this like grifter, this narcissist gets elected who doesn't care about living up to that mission. I tried to tell myself, hey, we've been through this before. We'll be okay. I don't like it. Some people are going to get hurt. There was no doubt in my mind, just like last time, there were people that were hurt, and we can talk about kids in cages or any of the, bad policies from the first administration, but at least there will be some, adults in the room. And very clearly, within, days of the election, really, but at least of the inauguration, it was clear that this was not going to be business as usual. We were going to have completely unqualified cabinet secretaries like Pete Hegseth and Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr., just to name a few. And at that point, I'm just getting angry, and I'm complaining to my wife, and she, and I'm not sleeping because I'm just so upset with what's going on. And my wife looks at me. I just remember this very clearly, and she was like, you can't just be angry for 4 years. And, my response was, you know what? You're right. I can't. It's time to do something. And so we started, I was like, okay, I need to get involved. Where do I think I can have the most impact, in the near term? And decided that was really about state level. And so decided to run for the Texas Legislature.
Wow.
That's, what? That's a perfect segue to the next thing. The perfect segue. So what kind of influence would a state legislature person have on the local level?
Yeah, on the local level, there's a ton we can do, right? So we can talk about something like our aquifers, right? So Texas has a major water problem. Part of my district is very rural, so I'm sort of a mix of suburban and rural. Everyone's gonna be helped by water, but the ranchers in Gonzales, Texas, or really across Texas, we can talk about this. But for me, I'm really focused on my district, their wells are running dry. And so we can, pass laws that include water recapture. We can look at desalination. There's a number of different policies in order to make sure that water is readily available. And one thing I look at is our grandparents really invested in infrastructure, right? So things like post-World War II, making sure that everybody had access to electricity, had access to water, the Eisenhower interstate system. My grandfather grew up on a farm in Ohio without access to running water. But because they were willing to make these investments, we have the world that we live in today. And if we're not making those investments, then we're going to be suffering, or our kids, my oldest is 14, and my youngest, so I have 14, 11, and 8. They're going to be suffering, and their kids are certainly going to be suffering if we're not making those impacts. So I think it's really important, and there's a number of local issues that the state legislature controls. If it's okay, I'd also like to talk about how we impact the federal level. You mind if I go that direction? Right? Because I think there's a lot of questions like, okay, well, if you're listening to this and you're not in Texas, why should you care? And what I point to is that Texas is a testing ground for policy. And I'll give you one example, although we could go into many. 2021, Texas passed, right? So after the repeal of Roe versus Wade, Texas passed a law allowing private citizens to sue anyone who aids or abets an abortion after about 6 weeks, right? And so this goes to the Supreme Court under Whole Woman's Health versus Jackson, right? Which was partially struck down, partially kept. That's probably another story for another day with the legalese of this. But at the end of the day, Texas is trying things so that the Supreme Court can overrule precedents that won't get there if a state doesn't pass these laws in order for them to be tested. And Texas, having the MAGA legislature on both sides, all right, on both houses, and the Republican governor who's tightly aligned with the Trump administration, allows them to pass these, I would say, insane laws that don't make any sense from a legal standpoint, and then allow the Supreme Court to make its rulings.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can gain, control would be great of at least one house. In the short term, it's probably not realistic to think that Democrats are going to take control. But by increasing the level of our minority, that allows us to create coalitions. And unlike sort of the federal government right now, where it's really sort of hard to find these coalitions, you can find them in the state legislature, right? There are, especially in the rural areas, Republicans that have not sort of drank the MAGA Kool-Aid and are still very willing to work with Democrats in a bipartisan manner to block some of these more extreme laws.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we need more of them with a spine, honestly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Preferably, with a spine.
Quickly.
Yeah. My district's a perfect example. So a guy named John Kemple was the representative here. He was a Republican.
Yes.
I had some policy disagreements with him, but he was a good he still is a good person who cares about our district and the people here. He refused to vote for school vouchers, which is a whole other issue we could talk about. And he wanted to indict Ken Paxton for his corruption. Ken Paxton, the Attorney General of Texas, if you're not familiar, completely corrupt, now running for the Senate. He was, they were voting on impeachment, and he was going to vote to impeach Paxton. The governor, through money funneled in through outside billionaires, gave $1 million for our current rep to primary John Kemple. It was a very highly contested race, and then Kemple lost. And so we lost this moderate Republican voice that, again, even though we had policy disagreements, we could work through policy disagreements and sort of we get this MAGA extremist that just does whatever he's paid for and doesn't really have to answer his constituents because he has so much money.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Which leads
that is not
perfectly into this next question, because everybody knows Texas is big. Texas is huge.
It is.
So what might be an issue in one part of Texas might not be an issue in another part. So we want to know specifically your constituents, how they've been affected these past 9 months. And that's crazy that it's only been 9 months. It feels like years. by this administration, tariffs, have there been any issues with farmers, with immigration? Tell us what your constituents are feeling right now.
Yeah, so I think my constituents are feeling probably what people across the country are feeling, right? The cost of beef is up 11% because the cost of inputs is up because of tariffs, right? So regardless of what the administration wants to say, tariffs are borne by the consumer. And as an economist, right, I am a free trade, I say almost absolutist. I hate to say absolutist because there's the world's complex. And so it's hard to say that anything 100%. But in general, right? And there was a time when I was a Republican because I was such a big believer in fiscal conservatism and free trade, right? Those were sort of the issues that kept me, even though I was a pro-choice Republican. So, I knew that there was no future running for office in that party.
Republican.
Right?
They're like,
but I'll say, I thought Roe versus Wade was the law of the land, and so I could sort of support Republicans saying like they can have this thing I disagree with, but it doesn't really matter because the law of the land is Roe versus Wade. Obviously, I was completely mistaken. I didn't expect us to be here, and that was after my transition to the Democratic Party. But sorry, I digress. But I firmly believe in free trade, and when we trade, when I want something and you want to sell something, it makes us both better off. And trade deficits aren't bad. I run a trade deficit with my grocery store. I give them money, they give me goods. Yeah. And yet, exactly. And so everyone's feeling the price of groceries is going up. I live in a very heavy veteran area. The cuts to the VA are massively impacting the people in my district. There have been something, like 80,000 personnel that are being cutting from the VA. Now that's nationwide, but all of that's creating backlogs, including at the VA here, right? So the Audie Murphy VA is a big one in San Antonio, and we're seeing wait times go up. It's hard to say what's going on with quality of care, but it's not hard to imagine that is decreasing, not because of the people that work there. They're doing their absolute best. But when you don't have enough people, when you don't have enough nurses, it's really hard to provide high quality care. Immigration, right? I've got lots of ranchers, right? Ranchers rely on farm work. We are making people scared. Whether they are documented or not, they are scared to go to work. And that is impacting our ability to, conduct the work that a farmer does or a rancher does. We've got to have people that are able to work. And I want to talk a little bit about this just quickly, because I don't want someone to listen and be like, and misconstrue what I said, that I think, we should have completely open borders. I do believe we should have secure borders. But on the other hand, we can't have a slave underclass, right? When you have undocumented workers, and this existed pre-Trump, and so this is not all just on him and his policies, although I think they make everything worse. We have people that are so afraid of the government that they're willing to work for slave wages or, well below minimum wage. And oh, by the way, if somebody gets attacked or raped at work, who do they call? They can't call the police. They're going to be deported. And so we have created a system where, we have this sort of new version of, slavery that we're putting our undocumented in. And so we have got to have a way to get people legal right to work in this country if they're already here. I pair that with let's secure the border, right? Let's not let new people in, although we need to have processes for asylum and all the legal ways that have stand, and why, people walking from South America to the Mexican border, not just so they can come in here and commit some crimes, right? They're coming because they want a better life, and let's not castigate that. But anyway, back to the question, right? When you don't have enough workers, what happens to the cost, like wages? They go up. And policies like the H-1A visa program, which allows farmers to bring in immigrant labor, are insufficient. One, you have to live in certain counties to use it, and our counties in my district are not some of those. The other thing is that the cost of bringing in that labor is so expensive that if you're not a massive farm, if you're a small family farm, you can't afford, the extra $7,000 per person to bring in that labor. Yeah. And so all they're doing is they're giving a handout to these massive farms when most of the farms in Texas are small family farms, and we're hurting those small businesses.
They
Yeah.
don't want to talk about that though. They never
Mhm.
want to talk about the fact that people are scared to go to work. And then when they
Yep.
go to
Yeah.
work, they don't get paid well, they don't get treated well.
Mhm.
And guess what? Nobody wins.
That's it.
Nobody.
And I just, nobody wins, right? So this came out in the 19th century, right? When we had chattel slavery, right? Like, slavery is bad for economics, right? There's a reason that economics became called the dismal discipline, right? Because people were mad that economists came out and said, you know what? Everyone's better off if you get rid of slavery. It actually would increase our economic growth if you get rid of slavery. Slave owners didn't want to hear that, but it's the truth. And so having people like this, they're not getting as much, they're not paying as much in taxes, they're not able to buy as much, right? Economic growth relies on this like strong middle class, and having a slave underclass is worse for our economy, right? It's not a matter, and people like to think it's like a pie, right? That you just, if they get some, I don't get it. That's not the way it works.
Yes, it's not
Yeah,
pie.
perfect. Love that you said about the slave underclass, because for some reason nobody wants to like put it that way when that's really what it is.
It
Like,
is.
call it what it is. I don't know why
Yeah,
people shy away from that verbiage.
Mm-hmm.
But on the
yeah,
topic
I
of
agree.
being shy with verbiage, so we're seeing how clearly there's been an attack on the First Amendment since, he got in, where they were trying to censor different words
Hmm.
in school. Like, you can't say woman or you won't be granted funding for your for your departments in school. So are you and your colleagues getting any type of pressure to censor or alter your curriculum? Has that
Yeah,
come down the
it's
pipe
a
yet?
great question. Yeah, it's a great question. So I think the answer is not directly, right? So
Mm-hmm.
let me actually take a step back and tell you that the First Amendment is the foundation of our democracy, right? There's a reason it was put as the First Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom to assemble, then we don't have a democracy. And
Yep.
I believe in the Constitution. I believe in the Constitution wholeheartedly. And for those that are wondering, and this goes against some of the progressive values of my party, I believe in the Second Amendment, but I also believe in the First Amendment, which is free speech. I also believe in the Fifth Amendment, which is due process. All of these amendments, this entire Constitution, equal treatment under the law, right? Like, all of these amendments are important. And so, but back to your question about the First Amendment, it has to do with, even though we're not directly being said, you can do this, you can do that, we're seeing what happened at Texas A&M, where a lecturer, Melissa McCool, I may not be saying her name wrong, right, and I apologize, Melissa, if I mispronounced it, is discussing, right, literature, and transgender issues come up in the literature. Now, I want to point out that she had read, I have this written down because I thought this might come up. She wrote this in her syllabus, right? In the syllabus we give to the students, they're able to see it before they register for a class, and certainly within the ad drop period. She wrote, quote, "Some of the material in this class might be controversial, and it is likely differing opinions will emerge. You are certainly not required to agree with me or your peers, or to adhere to any particular viewpoint." She goes on to insist on respectful dialogue. That seems pretty reasonable. And
Yeah.
yet, a student starts recording her, starts an argument with her, and then gets her fired, right? That is an attack. That is censorship on the way we're teaching. Again, disagree with her, agree with her teaching. That is academic freedom. And the fact that she's put out here, like, we're going to talk about things that we might not agree on. And transgender issues are hugely complicated, right? Again, this is not, right? I think I speak for most Democrats. I think we want equal treatment, right? We want equality, but there are some really complex issues when it comes to this, right? And I know that there is room for policy discussion that's not hateful, but that's how do we deal with these things? And and I'm open to those discussions, but unfortunately, right, we're what's being told to us through the state is you cannot have those discussions. You either take the far right standpoint or you lose your job. And that is the censorship that we're feeling. The second, right, is grants, right? So one of the ways that Trump has attacked the educated class I'll say and, or especially the Ivy League, is stopping grants. I had a grant. I'm at University of Texas San Antonio. We were not subject to what he was doing, but I happened to be working with somebody from Cornell. So my grant for Department of Defense, something hugely important for them, dealing with staffing models, was stopped. Not because we weren't doing good work or wasn't a question they needed to answer. It certainly wasn't a handout to us, right, to give us extra pay because they like us. It was because they had a question they needed answered. And now, not only is our Department of Defense being hurt, but like we're losing money and the university is losing money that grant was designed to fund. So yes, we are feeling censorship, even if it's not a direct, Professor Schwab, don't say this in your class.
As of now, too, and we're only 9 months in, so who knows?
Yeah,
it will become very direct.
It defeats the whole purpose of college to literally have differing ideas.
That's, that is the great thing about college, right? Is that we can have those discussions. We can think about, how we interact. Yeah. I tell my students all the time, the world is complicated. Anybody who tells you they have the answer is selling you a bridge in, waterfront property in Arizona. Mm-hmm. None of us have the answer. There are no right answers. Now, there are some objectively wrong answers occasionally, right? Yeah. But there are no right answers. Like, the world is hard. The world is complicated. And the way we get better is by discussing the trade-offs.
Yes, quite literally. I think Gavin Newsom said it perfectly, where we can't divorce the other party. We can't divorce ourselves from the Republican Party. They can't divorce themselves from Democrats. And if we actually want to find any common ground, the first thing we need to do is have honest discussions. And if those are not happening in classrooms, how do you expect for it to happen when you're a grown adult and maybe running as a politician? You're like, I actually have never talked about this because I was told I couldn't in college. Imagine that.
Yeah.
That's insane.
No, it's exactly it, right? And that's that's been one of my critiques of the Democratic Party. And one of the reasons that I think we lost a lot of rural voters is we haven't had those conversations. We haven't gone to places where, we don't necessarily, they're not going to tell us what we want to hear, and we're not going out there. So a big part of my campaign is going to areas that are deep red and saying, tell me your problems. You know what? You matter. And let's solve those problems together. But you're right. In college is where we start that. It's where we start those conversations, and people learn that, there's all walks of life. Not everybody is from the same place. We've got suburban, we've got rural, we've got urban, we've got Democrat, we've got Republican, we've got Northern, we've got Southern, right? We've got international, we've got, all of these things come together. And this is where we bring that together. And attacking our education system is attacking the foundation of what makes America great.
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely. And I want to touch on redistricting. When we think of redistricting, Texas obviously comes right to mind. We watched the battleground with redistricting. Well, we want to talk to you specifically. Would the redistricting in Texas, how is that going to affect veterans? Is that going to negatively affect veterans who are already being affected by this administration? And do you think other states should be following Gavin Newsom's lead in blue states, redistricting right back at them?
Yeah. So, I think everybody is affected by the redistricting, right? And I'm not even going to say redistricting, I'm going to say gerrymandering, right? It's gerrymandering, and it's taking away or disenfranchising people, right? It's taking away the impact of their votes. And so, yes, veterans are affected. I don't think they're differentially affected from everybody who is having their vote taken away. And it's a major concern for me. I think gerrymandering is wrong, and it's been done, again, I don't want to sugarcoat this. Like, both parties have gerrymandered. I think Republicans have taken it to a new level, right? And what really concerns me about this one is, like, we know gerrymandering occurs after censuses, but now we're moving to a world where every time there's an election, any state that has unified control is going to gerrymander even more. And we're going to lead to a world where we have red states and blue states, and there's no more transitioning over time. You just are what you are. And so the second part of the question is, do I think we should follow Gavin Newsom's example? What I'll say is Gavin Newsom is doing something that I think a lot of people really like, and he's fighting fire with fire, right? You do this, we're going to do this. What I will say is that an eye for an eye leads to two blind men. Like I am concerned about it. Now, one state doing it as sort of keeping us even, I'm okay with. I don't think other states should follow, right? I think we need to turn down the temperature and take a step back. I think, at the end of the day, we need, and this is where the federal system has to come into play. Congress needs to pass laws to the extent they can constitutionally, right? There are some limits regarding how we do redistricting. If they're not going to do it, states need to start doing okay, right? And some have done this, right? We have bipartisan commissions. I think there's a lot of use for algorithms, whether it's using integer linear programming. And if you wanted to get wonky, I can describe how these work, but it's probably too much details other than to say no computer can do it on its own, right? It still takes humans, and these things can still be abused, which is why you still need bipartisan commissions no matter what type of, or algorithm you employ. But I do think it's important that we realize that our country is a democracy, and democracy requires people have a vote, and the distancing shouldn't be based on Republican Democrat lines. It shouldn't be following old red lines or doing racial discrimination. It's got to be based on, okay, people who live close to each other, right here. This makes sense for, the contiguous districts to be able to vote. And again, this has been a problem as long as we've been doing redistricting, right? This has been a problem. Yes. And so it's not new. But I think Texas is sort of turning up the temperature, and we need to get people in office so that we can pull it back.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yep. Because I know me personally, my stance is like they're not playing by rules anymore. So I'm like, okay, listen,
all bets are off.
Let's put our head down, do the things that we need to do, and as soon as we get control back, God willing, outlaw it. Outlaws. We need laws. We need to cut it off. No more. Turn the switch off, because just turn off the gerrymandering, please. Yeah.
We found too many.
It's exactly it, right?
Yes, too many loopholes, like too many. And I think it being out in the open like this now is going to lead to this in the long run, because like we keep saying, nobody wants this. Like, we don't want to do this. Like, this is crazy. This is nuts.
It's voter suppression, because people, if you keep districting them, they're not going to go vote because they don't know what district they're in and they don't have time to figure it out.
Yeah. No. Yeah. What I will say is there are things we can do, right? We can get out and tell people. And again, this goes out to talking to people. It goes to those voter contacts. I'm running in a Trump plus 30 district, and I don't think it's out of reach.
Wow.
Right? Yeah. Is it an uphill climb? Like, I'm not going to sit in my house, send out some mailers and win. Right? Like let's be clear. It's going to take hard work.
Cross that aisle.
Yeah. You got to knock on a couple doors.
Yeah. Yeah, right. But that's how we get, right? We go out and we talk to people and we explain why our policies are better. And then we give them the information so that they can go vote. Right.
Yeah. Meet them where they're
at. Exactly. We've got to go meet them where they're at. And that's how we regain control. That's how we win these hard to win districts. And then we can pass the laws that don't allow this to happen again.
Right. Yep. So to that, what would be your top priorities when you win?
Sure. So I think that is a great question. And I like that you said when I win. I appreciate that.
We always say that
here. Because, so first is that, we have to invest in people. And so that's going to include, I'm going to be a little broader than 3 here because I bring them into, I can put them in 3 buckets here, right?
Okay.
When I think about what allows a person to thrive, the 2 things that come to mind to me are healthcare and education. And I'll give you a story about why healthcare is so important. And I'll get into reproductive rights, and that is a big, important topic, but it goes beyond that, right? So I was in Gonzales, Texas, very, very red, right? Like this is like an 80-20 Trump-Harris area. And I'm sitting in a diner talking to a waitress. who tells me about how she had just come back to work because she had been legally blind for like 3 years. And the problem was that she couldn't afford the eye surgery that she needed. And so we have somebody who is, other than her eyesight, physically capable of working, desires to work, is, I would say like working poor, right? Not particularly wealthy, right? Uninsured. Mm-hmm. And through happenstance, after 3 years, she happens to talk to somebody that's able to point her to a government program that could pay for this eye surgery. Now, did the government program exist? Yes. So somebody could say, oh, well, the program's there. But if people can't access it, if they don't know about it, and we've made it so complicated to access, it might as well not exist. Right? So she gets her eye surgery, and now she's back to work and, being able to regain her life that she couldn't have because she didn't have access to a basic surgical procedure that we, from an innovation standpoint, solved long ago. Mm-hmm. That is important, right? If we give people access to healthcare, it's not, again, not zero sum, not just, well, I don't want to pay for somebody else's surgery. Well, oh, by the way, now she's paying taxes, she's buying goods that we're trying to sell, like all of these things, right? Now I don't have to wait as long when I'm trying to go into a restaurant because they can hire a server, right? Like all of these things make us all better off. Healthcare is an enormously important, thing.
Yes.
Yes.
Service is what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
Education, right? Like, how do we break people out of cycles of poverty? We break them out through education. My dad went to night school to go to college, right? That helped me because now he knew, like, he was college educated, but he had a much tougher life than I've had because I was able to go to college, right? And it's not just sort of the university system. I obviously, as a college professor, I think, hugely important public, university education, but K through 12 education, and I'm a huge believer in public education because, again, just like we were talking about at the university level, this is where we get socialized. This is where we meet people that come from a different neighborhood, right?
Yep.
And
that's the point.
Yeah, like, exactly, right? Like, I can homeschool my kids on, math and addition and arithmetic and reading, but they're not going to get what they get out of the public school system.
Yep.
And so I think education, and then community colleges. Community colleges are access to higher ed for people who couldn't otherwise afford it. Yeah. And so if you ask me, like, education-wise, public university or community college, not that it has to be one or the other, I think both are important, but I'm going to tell you community colleges are the entrance point. That is where we need to make sure everybody has access to a community college so that they can get that basic start, that associate's degree, and then transfer to the public university system if they want to. So that's sort of the first end, is just investing in people, making sure people have the boots so that they can pull themselves up by their bootstraps, right? If you don't have the boots to begin with, really hard to pull yourself up. And we can say all we want about people pulling themselves up, but we've got to give them something, the tool to use in the first place. Yep. The second, that's exactly it, right? Like, it blows my mind why this is complicated. Every one of us got here with the help of our parents, our neighbors, a friend, a mentor, right? None of us did it all on our own. It doesn't mean that we didn't work hard. And I think sometimes people take that as an insult, thinking that means you got everything handed to you. It doesn't. There's no quote. I think it was Arnold Palmer, or maybe Jack Nicklaus. I might mess up who said it. But he, hit, golfer hits a crazy lucky shot, right? And somebody says, well, that was lucky. And he goes, yeah, well, the more I practice, the luckier I get, right? Like, yes, putting in the effort makes a difference, but you still have to have the opportunity, right? You still have to have sometimes the mentorship to tell you where to put that effort and where to aim it. So second is about infrastructure, right? And I already mentioned this earlier, right? We have got to be investing in our infrastructure. Yeah. We can't have a power grid that goes offline when it gets cold and allows people to freeze to death.
Yeah.
It's just like, duh.
Seems like you're not asking for a lot.
I'm not. but unfortunately, I'll call out Grover Norquist and the Club for Growth and sort of this right wing opinion that all taxes are bad, right? I want low taxes, right? And I can bring in like property taxes and how we need to work on lowering those for affordable housing, which I firmly believe. But not all taxes are bad. There are government systems, and those government systems require tax dollars in order to run. And we haven't made these investments because we've been fooled into believing that every tax is bad and we should just continually cut spending. Yes, there's waste. We need to try to root out as much waste as we can, but we also know that we need these services.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing I'll talk about is we've got to think about jobs, right? And jobs, yes, it has to do with education, but not just education. It has to do with our regulatory reform. It has to do with making sure small businesses, like those small farms I was talking about earlier, are on an even playing field. So I am very concerned with regulatory reform because what happens is that corporations, large businesses, use the regulations on the books in order to put small businesses out of business, not through competition, right? And again, I'm an economist. I love competition, right?
Yeah.
If Walmart can do something better than somewhere else, okay, I'll go there, right? But at the end of the day, when I always bring this up. One of the organizations or the companies that is the biggest fan of $15 minimum wage is Amazon, because Amazon knows that they can afford it and the small businesses they're competing with can't, right? And so, there are other ways to get people a livable wage, and we could talk about, again, another day probably. But at the end of the day, we cannot have regulations that allow big businesses just to push small businesses out so they won't have the competition. And so I'm a firm believer that small businesses are the engine that fuel our growth.
Those seem like the perfect 3 things to focus on. And I like the way that you presented them, not as like just healthcare, not as just trying to get more jobs. It doesn't even have to be as specific. It just could be broad as like, I would like people to be able to achieve their dreams of living day to day, affording groceries, having a job they like going to, being able to go see their doctor whenever they need to. It's really not rocket science, but it seems in this time or in these times that it's asking for too much. And I think that that's something we can start focusing our energy on. But it's hard to do that when people are checked out. So with this next question, there is a lot of fear around this next election cycle. And we already have an issue, especially with Democrats showing up to primaries to vote. But a lot of people are watching our administration just blatantly not follow the laws, the Constitution. And so they're thinking, does my vote even matter? Should I even vote? So what would you say to a constituent of yours that is feeling like their vote doesn't matter and they shouldn't even vote?
So I think it's a great question. And I think we have to communicate to people that their vote is their voice. And I would go back to 2 historical instances that I tell people, right? I want you to go back to the early 20th century and look at the organized labor and the unions. And how did organized labor change our safety laws, right? So we can go back to meatpacking plants and Upton Sinclair's The Jungle and say, or the Triangle Fire, right? Like all of these horrible instances of what was going on in corporations, 120 years ago. And by people sticking together, right, by organizing, they were able to achieve things that no one individual could achieve. The second point I point to is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., right? If he went to somebody and said, hey, come march with me, it's a hard sell. Hey, I'm going to go march and we're going to all of a sudden have, end segregation, have equal rights, right? And yet, what happened? Everyone joined together, right? They boycotted buses, right? And they used their collective voice together. It's a collective action problem, as we talk about in economics, right? But when people band together, we are stronger together. And so I say, you know what? I understand that you feel as an individual, your vote doesn't matter. And as an individual, that is true. But together, your vote and my vote and your vote, Casey, and your vote, Devin, together they matter. And so we have to stick together and achieve what the union movement in the early 20th century, what Dr. Martin Luther King did. And now we can do it to take back our country.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and these questions spot on. Jeez.
It's nice to hear, because I feel like people always are used to just hearing, and even growing up where everybody was like, why do you vote? And it's like, because everyone fought for your right to vote, so you need to vote. And yes, that is true. A lot of people risk their lives for us to be able to have free and fair elections that we vote in. But it's more than that. It's not just you should do it because of the past. It's you should do it because of right now, and you should do it because of the future, and you should do it because of everyone, not just you. And I like hearing an answer like that, where it's like, that's your voice. This is your chance to make a difference. And if we all come together, we can see change that we might not think we could ever see. We can't lose that.
Yeah,
it's a project.
I agree, right? And, I go back to my time as, a hospital controller, right? CFO. We used to say pennies make dollars, right? Well, what's a penny here and a penny there? Well, no, but you add them together and they end up being real money.
Yeah. Yes.
We had 90 million people sit out.
Yeah. 90 million people did not feel strongly enough to go vote.
Yeah.
And look at how worse those numbers could be.
Yeah. And that is the hard part, right?
Difference.
That's why we have to go door to door and have this conversation. Because I think when you have this conversation, you can convince, a large proportion of people. But you have to have the conversations. And it goes back to going door to door, knocking on every door. I spend a lot of time going to MAGA bars, right? Go to bar because that's where people are, right? And let's have a beer, have a conversation, right? Yeah. And I get a lot of like, oh, I'm a Republican. Yeah, right? Like people, I don't vote Democrat. And then, they say like, well, maybe, yeah. Yep. Again, this is how we have conversations, and this is how we get people to say, you know what, like, let's turn it down, right? The stereo is at whatever 11, right? Let's turn it down. Let's have a beer, And again, it starts at I don't vote Democrat to well, I vote for the person, not the party, right? I've heard that numerous times because once you convince people that you care, you can earn their vote. It's the rhetoric that Democrats hate America that's hurting us right now.
Yes, of course. And that's the thing. There's so many people are like, Democrats hate the Constitution. Democrats hate guns. And it's like, you don't open your eyes and see that most Democrats own a gun.
Right?
We love the Constitution. We don't like how you take the Constitution and spin it to be your narrative like they're doing right now, where we're like, with the Constitution's for everyone. It's not just for whoever you want it to be for, it's for everyone. Right. So we have to
it's for everyone.
We have to stop it on both sides too, because there are, and I thoroughly believe that there are people that you just can't reason with on the right, but there are a lot of people you can. And so it doesn't mean that we don't talk to anyone on the right. It just means that we need to try and find common ground with people. If you can't, you can't, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't try.
I agree, and I'll say I think on both sides, I think there's 10% on both sides that I'm never going to be able to talk them to anything, right? Like they're so struck on what they believe, right? Whether it's, the very far left or the very far right. But I think that leaves 80% in the middle, right?
Yes.
We
have our offenders like Chuck Schumer.
Yes. We have people on the left that are like, that we're like, oh my gosh, you want to shake them. You just want to.
Like, you're literally not listening to us.
You're not listening, and you're not showing up.
No, exactly.
It's one issue. And it's just like, you want to shake them. But I mean, it's just great to hear that there are people who are still willing to, politicians that are still willing to go out and hear what the other side thinks and try to find ways to make each other more human again. We're all humans.
Yeah.
Good life. Just
I talked in my stump speech, right? I talked in my stump speech that I've been to Ukraine. I was actually there in high school. So before this war, right after the fall of the Soviet Union. I've been to China. I've been to Iraq. I've been to Kuwait. I've been, all around the U.S. And everyone I talk to, right, all the people I've met want the same things, regardless of where they're from. They want security. They want to be able to raise their family in peace. They want, access to food and water, right? They want a good education, and they want a bright future, right? They want to be optimistic about what's going on. And we can provide that, right? We have the resources to give people the security they need and the bright future that they desire for themselves and their families. And, right wing, left wing, Republican, Democrat, like we all want the same things. We just have to communicate. Now, sometimes there's a different vision and we're going to have policy differences for how we get there. And that's okay. Again, back to the conversation. We can discuss those policy differences, and sometimes we're going to vote, and sometimes we're going to win a vote, and sometimes we're going to lose a vote. And that's okay, right? That is democracy. But we've got to have those conversations. We can't just cut out a portion of the population because we think that they don't like us and we don't like them. Like that's to me, that's crazy. And that doesn't push us forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good transition to the fun portion of these questions. So since you wouldn't be just who would you pick as a VP, dead or alive, if you were to be president of, not just one party, all parties?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so I'm split between two. So if you don't mind, I'm going to take a little license here and tell you two people. I'll tell you my first choice because, at some point you got to make a decision. So my first choice is Theodore Roosevelt, who I think, right, first of all, right, Republican and environmentalist, right, conservative, knew how to talk to people, right? Yeah. He was going to get out there and, there was no, oh, this is going to be hard, I'm not going to do it in Theodore Roosevelt. You talk about somebody that can overcome adversity, right? Theodore Roosevelt is one of my personal heroes. The other one that is another personal hero, and so I'll say this would be my second choice since I had to choose one, is Harry Truman. And Harry Truman's character, right, shines through for anything, right? The buck stops here. And I just love, again, like he was behind in the polls, right, going into his re-election, technically election because he had come up as vice president against Dewey, right? And it's, give him hell, Harry. And he says, I don't give him hell. I just tell them the truth and they think it's hell, right? Yeah. And so I think, they're very different in many ways. And yet they both have these aspects of who they are that I would just love to have around me.
I wasn't able to guess, but that was the vibe I was looking for who you would pick. I usually try to guess. I wasn't able to guess this time.
Really?
Yeah, sometimes we try to guess. We haven't been right, though, so we just stopped guessing.
Yeah.
Really? I'm curious. Who would you have guessed it? Who would you have guessed?
So earlier I was like, okay, he likes MLK a lot. He might go with that.
I do like MLK a lot.
And then I was like, I don't know. I was like, I wasn't surprised when I heard Teddy Roosevelt. I was like, okay, that suits you.
I was like, maybe.
Yeah, the dog you might hear, the dog you might hear barking in the background, his name is Theo, after Theodore Roosevelt. So,
oh, that's your guy. Okay.
He was like, I'm going to keep that one right until I answer this question. Well, here we like to do a little would you rather because it's fun. We like to have fun at the end. It doesn't have to be too serious.
Okay.
So with everything that's happened in the past 24 hours, we thought that this one would be a fun would you rather, which is, would you rather listen to Trump rant about windmills for an hour straight or a whole Caroline Leavitt press conference that you have to sit through?
Would I rather be tortured by fire or drowned? Okay. I'm going to say that I would rather listen to Trump rant about windmills because it's so incomprehensible. I wouldn't know what he's saying. Unlike Leavitt, who I actually can hear what she's saying and get angry.
Yeah. It's more, do you want to sit there and go off into your own land of trying to make sense of what he's saying or sit there and fume?
See, I heard the windmill talk at the UN, and I was like, nodding.
These windmills are catching strays.
Every time I think about him, I just think about like Austin Powers and sharks with laser beams.
I just want to know
Sharks.
what show he watched, what movie he watched that prompted this new idea in his head that he will rant about for the next 24 hours straight, and we're all subjected to it.
What's crazy to me is I think he read Don Quixote and he probably saw the movie or read the Cliff Notes.
Yes,
But
so many people
he
are
read
bringing
Don
that up.
Quixote. Yeah, and then Don Quixote was like the hero. He's attacking windmills.
And we can get it every time. It's so predictable. Everyone's like, okay,
He's so
which movie
predictable.
was it? Which movie did they play for him on Air Force One on his little
Mm.
iPad?
All
That's
right,
probably my
here you
answer
go.
too. I would too, because that's what would be going through my brain. I'd be trying to process
Yeah.
how we got here. And yes, that would definitely be my answer.
Yeah, the dementia was taking hold definitely the
Mhm.
other day. I was like, oh, we
I
bumped
had
to threats
grip
to
hold.
windmills.
Yes.
Cool,
Yeah.
cool. Well, for the last question that we like to wrap up on, we like to ask everybody, what's like your hidden gem in Texas? Like what would be your selling point to someone if they were to be coming to Texas?
So I would say go to Gonzales. Gonzales City is the county seat of Gonzales County, Texas, and it is the birthplace of Texas, right? So if you ever heard "Come and Take It," right? This is the old
Mhm.
story where where the Mexican army had loaned a cannon and they wanted it back, and the people of Gonzales said, come and take it.
Click it.
Yeah.
And that is in Gonzales, Texas. It is a hidden gem, right? It's not that far, right? It's, an hour basically outside of San Antonio. And yet you go there and it's got a lovely main street, lots of little shops, souvenir shops and some really cool diners. I'm a big fan of Come and Crepe It, a little crepe place.
Come and
Right?
crepe it.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
Great.
So I would say come to Gonzales, Texas. You
Come
won't
and
regret it. There's a nice
Oh,
museum
I'm
there.
sold.
Yeah.
Crepes?
Well, let me
Man.
know. I'll come take you around. Yeah.
Yes. See, that's what I like. It's actually, we're asking that question for ourselves.
Yeah, it's like, when everybody
Yeah.
wins and we
When
do our
everybody wins, we'll do
tour.
like a world or a countrywide tour of all of the hidden gems and see if you guys were right, if they really were hidden gems.
Yeah.
Well, let me know. Like I said, I'll come. I'll walk Gonzales with you. It's great.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Going straight to Come and Crepe It.
Yes. Immediately going to come and crepe it. Well, before we outro out, I want to give you a moment to shameless plug your socials, your website, and if you have any in-person events that you know of coming up, just go ahead, shameless plug away.
Yeah. So I'll give you some plug. My website is www.schwabfortexas.com. My name is Schwab, spelled SCHWAB as in boy, and then for spelled out, and at Schwab for Texas at any of the social medias, X, Blue Sky, Instagram, TikTok, you name it. Even I have a Substack at Schwab for Texas, so you can see what I'm writing and what I'm thinking about. And if you're interested in hearing more about Harry Truman and Theodore Roosevelt, I have a blog. I wrote about them as well as Dwight Eisenhower. And then my next in-person event, we're still in the planning. I will be there's a No Kings rally on October 18th in downtown Cibolo that I'll be at, and I'll be making some remarks there. Other events are still in the planning at this moment. Although I will say we are having, I believe it's October 17th, a Democratic event. A number of Democratic candidates are going to be there in Seguin, Texas. I'm sorry, I don't have the details right in front of me as far as the location. I know it's in Seguin. I think it's the Fiesta Ballroom. But I would say, my email is steve@schwabfortexas.com. If any of your listeners are interested in coming out, I know Joe Jaworski, former mayor of Galveston, now running at state level, is going to be there. Several others will be there. So just reach out. I'm happy to provide information. I'll have a couple remarks, not very long, right? I think I have like 2 minutes or something, 2 or 3 minutes, but I will be there and I can meet you. Yeah. And, but I think it'll be a great event. So if you're in the area and you want to come out, just send me a note and I'll get you situated. Other than that, I just want to say thank you to you both. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you for
We
coming.
look forward to these interviews every single week. It has been so much fun. And for everyone listening, thank you guys for listening in to this Grassroots interview. We do it every single Thursday, and we plan to continue doing it as long as there's candidates willing to come on and talk to us. We hope by primaries next year, there is a full catalog and you can find your candidate and listen to all the amazing policies that they hope to bring and everything that they believe in. That's what we need right now. We need hope for the future. So thank you all for listening in. As always, we'll be back next Thursday for another grassroots candidate interview. And we hope that you have a great rest of your week. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.